iDS Talks is a podcast dedicated to helping corporations and law firms find new and effective ways to leverage data, giving them a decisive advantage both in and out of the courtroom.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of iDS Talks. My name is Jonathan Sachs, Chief Revenue at iDS, and I'm joined today by Julian Ackert, a Managing Director here at iDS. We're going to talk today about overcoming data challenges in high-stakes litigation. Julian's been doing this for 16 years at iDS and beyond, and so I thought this would be a perfect topic. So welcome to the podcast, Julian.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great to see you again.
Julian started this, by the way. I mentioned 16 years. Julian was a prodigy. He started when he was about 4.
I wish that was true.
Yeah, don't we all?
That's right.
We all? All right. So I told the audience this was going to involve conversation around high stakes litigation. For our listeners, anytime where the company could live or die, depending on the outcome, these are ones where it's critical to the life of and the continuation of a particular business. Julian, with that as the framework, I'd like to ask questions as it ties into data. So the first question I have is that we find high stakes litigation often involves a staggering amount of data. So much, because you could have a lot of people involved. I'm sure you'll share more reasons why. But for you, based on what you've seen, what are the most common data challenges clients face in these complex cases? And then I'll have a second part to that question.
Sure. So you're not wrong. We're dealing with a massive amount of data within cases now. What's really interesting is finding the data that matters and then coming to grips with the fact that a particular fact may cross data sources. And what I mean by that is finding the data that matters means understanding where is your client's system that stores data that is relevant or potentially relevant to this case. We've got our more common elements of today, such as emails, but we're seeing more and more facts stored in other systems like chat systems, or maybe even a product development system or a sales tracking system. So understanding the fact pattern is no longer just linear within one system. You've got to start to combine facts from many different systems into the fact pattern and understand how the fact moves and how the facts move from system to system.
Yeah, very interesting. So for those that don't know, I got involved with the world of e-discovery in 2005. I was 4 at the time. Also, maybe not. I wish. As Julian Ackert says, I wish. And then, the data that matters. You just talked about that in the different data sources, data systems. Back then, the data that matters was who's the custodian, get me their computer, and get me their phone. Maybe. And so now you're seeming to say, yeah, that's still part of it. That could be the traditional part, but you have other systems and sources that are going to tell, would you say, a more complete story?
Definitely a more complete story. And also, if you just start thinking of that earlier on, you're getting ahead of the game. What we're often finding is that the approach that we took 15 years ago is the same approach we're taking today, which is get me the computer. And then you're finding that there's a lot of holes in the facts, right? You see either there's missing data timeframes or a fact jumps from A to B, and you're thinking to yourself as you're defending or prosecuting the case, how can the facts jump like that? Something's missing. And very quickly you realize as you go back and talk to the custodian in interviews or other things like that, that the facts are recorded not just on the computer, but in other systems. We used to think of the computer as the mothership for the individual. The computer has everything for the individual. It's not true anymore. There are systems that are very cloud-based. And as a matter of fact, that's where a lot of companies are moving, is to more cloud-based data storage, where the facts that matter are stored in the cloud. And so the computer needs to be bolstered or supplemented with other systems that store facts, and then all brought together so that we can do our fact finding.
Got it. So Julian, it sounds like, at least from the iDS perspective, You're not going to be an order taker and just saying, thanks for the custodian's name. Here's where you can ship devices. You're going to be more consultative. You're going to want to ask questions at the outset to understand the story, perhaps, that is going to be told or would like to be told.
I'm always going to do that. Now, what's interesting is sometimes I've asked those questions, and sometimes they have led to aha moments where we've gone and grabbed additional data sources. Other times we've asked the questions and we've thought, for this particular case and where it is right now, we're going to start with this system or these systems. We're not going to expand to these other systems yet. We'll go preserve the data, but let's take a measured approach to try to find the facts in a reasonable amount of time, effort, and budget.
Yeah. All right. So great point. So that duty to preserve may have arisen. So you're right. So you're preserving it. You don't necessarily review it at that time. And it seems like through analysis and further conversation, you get to these other sources. So it's an iterative process.
That is absolutely right. And that's why today we're seeing more and more potential use of early case analysis or early data analysis tools and technologies that doesn't shove everything into a review stream, but allows you to have a place where you can interrogate the data cheaper, more reasonably,
Sure.
And not worry about paying for everything downstream for data that you may not need. There is an immense amount of noise surrounding facts in digital systems. And trying to sift through that noise requires technology and an understanding of how and where to best apply that technology.
So you've skipped ahead, Julian. You skipped ahead and you went to my next question, which is, how does the role of data analytics allow ECA or EDA, again, early case assessment or early data assessment, to be used more often?
So I don't think I skipped ahead. I think you and I are on the same wavelength here.
Okay, fine.
Using that technology and using these processes. Look, you can slog through data and eventually find what you're looking for. Still very possible to do. Very expensive. Takes a lot of time. So rather than slog through all of it, figure out where the data resides. Bring it into a system that allows for interrogation, like an ECA or an EDA system. Bring along somebody who understands how to interrogate the data. How do I sift through all the noise that I'm seeing in these emails to understand where the content is? How do I interplay the emails and the text chat communications and the calendar entries and the call logs all together to really display the facts? How do I look at a system like the communication patterns that I'm seeing to understand, am I missing a communication system? If I look at the trends and patterns in how people are communicating, which you can do in an ECA or an EDA environment, and all of a sudden I'm seeing holes, even before I start really spending a lot of dollars on human review, I can think about, what am I missing? How do I bolster it? How do I get more of that information? Or how do I deal with that bad fact that I'm missing data?
Yeah, interesting. I like to, and I think you'd agree with this, that data analytics allows you to understand the context before looking at content.
That is absolutely right, and very, very important in the world that we live in. The context becomes almost just as important as the content.
Yeah. All right. So while data is critical, understanding context and nuance of a case requires human expertise. We've just been talking about technology with the human element, but I really want to focus on that human part. So the question to you is, how does iDS balance the power of data analytics and the tools and tech that's there with the need for human judgment?
So it's interesting you bring that up, because I feel like we're starting to live in a world where everybody thinks you can just hit a button and get all your answers. And we will be there one day, but we're not there today. And especially with the discovery and fact-finding process, we are getting better at interplay of facts between systems, but we need humans to help us sift through the noise, and we need humans to be able to actually, at some point, judge the level of responsiveness and importance to the case. And again, I'm not saying that we're going to always be here with humans, but what's interesting to me is that humans are also the most expensive part of the process. So how do I leverage humans in the most efficient manner? How do I get to that first level review team, stuff that matters, and sift out the noise? Because I'm starting to cut down costs. The more that first level review team is looking at more relevant content and less relevant content. And again, we're not there yet where you just hit a button and it's all relevant content going down. There's still a human element, but the more I understand how I use technology to supplement that human element of the reviewers, of the attorneys looking at the documents, with another human element of a technologist who understands how the data, what does this data mean as it interplays with each other? Bringing that all together allows us to figure out for the whole case team where are the facts that matter and how do the facts play with the allegations.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with this point. I think what's important for lawyers to realize is that their clients are paying them to do the job of lawyering. They're not paying them to necessarily sift through noise. So as the technology improves and the noise, as we're calling it, can be removed, you mentioned it going to first pass reviewers. If there's a smaller corpus of data to be reviewed by the first pass reviewers, they can get through it faster, which means that the case team can get what they need sooner, and they can start asserting the claims or the defenses of their clients and doing the job they were hired to do faster and more cost effectively.
You know, I'm looking at your headset right now and your headphones, and I'm almost thinking they're like noise canceling headphones. We're using technology to sift out the noise so that you can hear better, right? And in this manner, we're using technology to sift out the noise so that you can understand the facts that matter better.
I like that. I actually wear these so that I think that I'm a cool podcaster. But we're going to go with it was a great prop for this conversation. All right, next question for you. We've talked about technology, but both the tech and regulations that surround data and how it's maintained are constantly changing. So how does iDS stay ahead of the curve to ensure that clients have access to the most advanced data tools and data strategies, the combination of tech and human?
Great question. So the first way we stay ahead of the tools is not fall for the fact that everything is push button right now. Like I said, we understand where the technology is today, where we are defensible. And again, we approach this like we're on the stand. We understand where we can be defensible on the stand with various technologies and where you may necessarily not be able to and where you may not want to pivot at this time. We understand how to apply those technologies into the various data sets. And the benefit of a company like iDS is we've collected from all different kinds of systems out there, whether they are textual-based systems like email or chat communications, whether they are structured systems that integrate a whole slew of types of information, like I'll go back to that product lifecycle development type of system where facts and information really needs to be pulled and analyzed in a certain way, whether they are call logs and recordings of information, or even a call center where it's not just the behavior of the call center employees and how they're using the systems, but also the recordings coming out of that from the individual callers and how to leverage technology to appropriately extract the text from those and weave them back into the narrative.
Yeah. One of the things that I heard from you and is resonating with me, Julian, was the part about defensibility. We talked about, the ease of technology or use of technology. I think people can run the risk of working with a partner that bought the product off of the shelf, bought the software solution off of the shelf, and doesn't really understand its impact, doesn't understand that the way of doing certain things can impact the data in a certain way, which then can get called into question. And so approaching it from the outset of the defensibility portion of this, I think is definitely a differentiator and something that I know you and our colleagues are focused on these projects, understanding that how things are done, and the how is not just the choices that are made, it's the tools that are used, is something that you need to be very aware of at the outset.
That's absolutely right. And if you think about it, like the why behind that, why IDS is really good about that. Because we're testifying experts, we've got a cadre of individuals who are always thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead. That's just what we do on the stand. And when we apply that early on as to what choices we make now, what is that going to look like 3 or 4 steps down the road, we can really help navigate the whole discovery and fact-finding process in an effective way.
Yeah. Okay. Last question, unless I come up with another one. But here you go. So looking forward, what do you see as the biggest data-related challenge facing the legal industry in the next, call it 3 to 5 years? And how is IDS preparing for them?
I think there's 2 of them. One of them is the fact that we are finding information woven through different systems that is potentially relevant, and it's no longer just isolated into one system. 15 years ago, you could look at email and you could follow the fact pattern just in email. Today, to follow the fact pattern, you would need to maybe potentially move from email to the chat system. Maybe it's Teams, maybe it's Slack, over the phone, over to a system like Zoom and has a chat program built into Zoom, over to call logs to understand, oh, after this particular fact, a whole bunch of people were calling each other about XYZ. And maybe you even have a few voicemails tied to that are stored in the voicemail system, down to, let's go back to that product lifecycle system. Do we see trends and patterns in the activity tied to a particular product at that time? So the whole fact pattern is crossing multiple different systems. So instead of approaching the discovery process and fact-finding vertically within each system, we need to approach it horizontally across systems. That's a really big challenge. And the way that we're dealing with that now is understanding at the very beginning, what are all the different systems, and coming up with a plan, a reasonable approach plan to pull the information from those systems together before reviewing production. And the other challenge, I think, again, we're in this world where AI is such a buzz that people are thinking you push buttons and get to answers. We're not there. And so keeping human in the whole process, but understanding how to carve that human time down as much as possible to save cost.
Yeah. Well, very interesting conversation today, Julian. I want to thank you for joining me, and I look forward to the next one of these that we do. I'd like to also thank our regular subscribers and those that may be first-time listeners for spending time with us. If you'd like to learn more about IDS or want to subscribe to our IDS Talks podcast, you can go ahead and visit idsinc.com or wherever you normally get your podcasts from. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can also hit that subscribe button. Thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to talking more about data with you in our next edition of IDS Talks.
Thanks, Jonathan.